Welcome to Queernecks, the podcast that puts the yeehaw in y'all means all. I'm your host, Beck.
And I am your host, Dash. Welcome to today's episode.
This week on Queernecks, we got a friend who joined us and we got to talking again. So we're just going to skip the wheel of what have you and just bring him right on out here. You may know our special guest, Willie Edward Taylor Carver Jr. He was Teacher of the Year in 2022, Kentucky's Teacher of the Year, due to a lot of the work he did as both an advocate in and outside the classroom, and his students were just massively successful. And then he published a book, Gay Poems for Red States, in 2023, and it has a super high rating on Goodreads. I don't know how important that is, but I know that there's also a shitload of reviews that say it changed their life and altered how they think, how they see queerness, how they see Appalachia. That's just the kind of work that we really love to see out there. Well, Willie, welcome to Queernecks.
Thank y'all for having me.
I was just really pleased that you said yes. I felt kind of crazy just sending that email out into the ether to your publisher.
I've made it clear to them, like, I don't care who it is, especially if it's LGBTQ related or Appalachian related, like, just go ahead and send it on to me because there's too much work to be done. Anybody who's trying to do that work, I want to support and want to be a part of it. So thank you all.
Well, you're from Kentucky and I am from Kentucky as well. Beck's a nasty Ohioan.
From 5 minutes away from Kentucky.
I mean, really, what's a border in Appalachia?
Yeah.
Right. That's just one of those constructs trying to keep us down. And I grew up with that disdain for the entire state of Ohio and really didn't learn about Appalachian Ohio for a long time, but it definitely exists.
Oh, yeah.
You thought of Ohio as the North growing up in East Tennessee.
Well, and my cousins come in from Ohio, they would always go like, it's so boring here. I'm like, well, what do you do in Canton? Like, we're going to go steal some Cubcaps. Like, we can do that here if you want. I had a chip on my shoulder. But yeah, Ohio's got lovely parts.
I'm from pretty close to where Hocking Hills is, if you know where that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met up there at grad school in Northwest Ohio, a place I'd never really thought I'd wind up, and was surprised to find things that felt like home there.
Mm-hmm.
I think Appalachia as a region, first of all, it's massively diverse, but its culture and its ways of life extend beyond it, any places that continue to be rural. So, like, being in rural Northwest Ohio, I was like, this is still pretty country.
Well, and I think for me, too, I've thought a lot about how, like, what makes Appalachia special to me, and you can find that all over the world even. And to me, like, whatever I mean when I say Appalachia doesn't necessarily connect just to the hills. I lived in France after my undergrad, and I was in the north of France, and the part of France that I lived in had some farming and lots of coal. 30 years before that, that was all gone. There was a lot of poverty, strong regional accents, so strong, in fact, that they were made fun of anywhere else in France. I felt so at home there. In fact, I went to England with some high school students and was aggressively protective of my students when the Parisians were around, and kind of shifted what I thought about Appalachia, because I'm like, this is Appalachia as I mean the word.
So kind of a worldview and approach to just living and making do.
Yeah, and Appalachianness informed my queerness. So when I say LGBTQIA, that A stands for Appalachia and other stuff. But it's queerness. When somebody says he's queer, they say, what they mean often is he's different and we're aware of it. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much what queer is. And every lesson I learned as a kid, figuring out how to deal with the fact that I was going to face pushback for being Appalachian, was go do it on purpose. Go make fun of them. Go be yourself in a way that is undeniably Appalachian and smarter than them.
Yeah.
And it's exactly how I did queerness. I just copied it.
I think any identity that comes from a positionality of disempowerment, it requires a degree of humor and, like you say, a little bit of like, be faster than them, be quicker than them. You got to beat them to where they're going.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One of those, I don't know, ABC, NBC, CBS, one of those was doing, the poverty in the hills sort of documentaries. And we can do documentaries about poverty in the hills that are nice, but this is not one of those. This was one of those exploitative things. And a friend of mine, her dad owned a coal mine at the time. They are in his office because he has an office, a trailer outside of this mine. And he comes in completely head to toe covered in coal black with white socks on because he took his boots off to go talk to these guys. So they've got the camera. They sort of do this down to his socks and they go, so you don't have boots? You have to go into the mines in your socks? Now he's just watching them thinking, how would my socks be white and clean, But he just leans right into it. He's like, oh yeah, I was hoping last year to get a pair of boots, but I couldn't do it yet. But maybe next year we'll make it happen. That's exactly that. They think they've won until they go back and look over
Yeah, that it doesn't match up. For a long time, I would fight against my accent. Like, it's fairly strong. Where I'm from is Jellicoe, and it's a coal mining town on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky.
Act like people don't know what Jellicoe is.
Well, I have met so few people who know what Jellicoe is.
Multiple times in my life, I thought I was just going to have to stay camp there when the snow came.
Yeah. Jellicoe Mountain, you ain't going to get over it. And it don't even have to be that much snow, just a thin veneer of ice.
We got grounded down in Gatlinburg 3 years ago, maybe. It was that really big snow came and all the electricity was out. It was awful. We got stuck in a cabin and we were trying to figure out if it was safe to drive home. And there was no app. There's no nothing. And I said, there's a Waffle House and a McDonald's up on Jellicoe. So I just called the McDonald's and I said to this kid, I said, is it safe to drive? And this kid goes, hold on, let me look out the window. And then he comes back and he goes, yeah, it's looking good. I was like, this is better than any app.
It's an experience. And that region there too is also really enmeshed in the Union Wars and like the miners uprising and things. A lot of folks from Jellicoe went over to Blair Mountain, but I would try real hard to change my accent because it is the Jellicoe dialect. When I was growing up there, it was really strong. There wasn't any media coming in the 80s though. Mm-hmm. So like I was raised on Star Trek and that was my only reference point for how the rest of the world spoke. And so I fought against my accent for a long time. And then I think I just burnt out, came back with a vengeance.
I got a linguist brain, and as country as I sound now, like my accent is destroyed just from living everywhere. And I've never intentionally tried to change it, except for when I lived in France. I was there to get the students to teach English. So they had a person born in France teaching them English, and my job was just to get them to speak to a native speaker. But I would look at them and go, so you got a brother or sister? And all these students just acted like they couldn't understand a word I said. And then it occurred to me, one time I was asking them what they liked, what they did at Christmas. And one of them raises their hand in French and wanted to know how to say salmon. So I go, okay, repeat everybody, salmon. And they all go, salmon. And I was like, oh, God, that's just what they hear. So I said to this girl, you got a brother or a sister? And I go, okay, I know what to do. And I go, have you got a brother or sister? And then she answers, yes, I have a brother or whatever. And so for 2 years, I spoke with a fake received pronunciation in France to French teenagers as if I was from England. And when you do that for 2 years, and that's the only English you speak, it messes everything. So I moved to Georgia after that. Was teaching at the University of Georgia. First test day in French class, I was like, all right, y'all, I'm speaking English. I don't know what I sounded like at the time, but no stress. It's just English. Any questions? And one of them goes, where are you from? Where do you think I'm from? And one of them goes, well, it's obvious English ain't your first language, but you do it real good. And then somebody else goes, no, I think that's what New Zealand sounds like.
Oh, man. Here in far west Minnesota, they often can't understand what I'm saying. And one kid told me, I said, they go like, where are you from? I said, I'm from Kentucky. And this kid goes, you look like you're from Kentucky. I was so taken aback that I didn't even think to just like bust their balls on it because I was like, what in the hell does that mean? Would you like to know where you look like you're from? Like you are stepping to a mean ass hillbilly.
I taught in Vermont for a couple of years and
Vermont's not real. I'm not convinced that's a real place. Like I can't even.
My grandmother-in-law, when we explained to her that we lived in Vermont, she goes, well, no, that's Canada. We were like, no, it's an American state. Well, no, I know America and I've never heard of a Vermont. And we were like, well, and then we told her our zip code, which was like 007. And she goes, no, that's not zip code. It doesn't start with a 0. You're in Canada. But I had a teacher, love her heart, bless her heart. A teacher said to me, wow, you speak French? How interesting. What does your French sound like starting from your accent? And I go, oh, that's so adorable. Do you think that your accent better translates into French? Why is that? Yeah. And I caught her up in like her classism. And then she was trying to change the subject. And I'm like, no, I'm really interested. What about Vermonter English do you think just naturally sounds better? How? I've never heard this. Is there research?
Do people ever correct you on how to pronounce Versailles outside of Kentucky? I've had people tell me, oh, no, it's pronounced Versailles. And I was like, it ain't pronounced Versailles in French. So why would it be pronounced Versailles in America? Versailles is more accurate to the French than Versailles is.
Plus, they always go after Southerners for how we pronounce things. Go to the Northeast and hear how they've butchered French It's not even butchering anyway. It's in English, But Charlevoix was the name of a truck company. So we were brand new to Vermont, so we didn't know anything. So we would call it as we read it. And I was saying something about how we lived not too far from Charlevoix. And people were like, "What are you saying?" And I said, "Charlevoix. It's a big trunk company." They're like, "Are you talking about Charlie Boys?" That's what they call it. People tried to correct my grammar, and it never ever went well for them. I was walking out of my classroom once. The teacher across the hall said, "Good morning. How are you?" And I said, "I'm good. How are you doing?" And she goes, "Don't you mean I'm well?"
Girl.
Do you think I'm using it as an adverbial modifier or a substantive qualifier? And then she kind of just looked at me and goes, "No, I mean this literally. If you think you're going to correct me, I'm going to need you to engage in this conversation." And then I just stared at her until she walked into her classroom and closed her door. She never said a thing after.
Also, I'm no longer having a good morning, so congratulations. So you're from Floyd County, right?
Yeah, Floyd County, Eastern Kentucky. My husband used to joke that he thought I was part of the mafia.
Is that where Moorhead is?
Not far from Moorhead. It's an hour and a half.
Gotcha.
But I went to school in Moorhead, though. People would say, "Where are you from?" And sometimes I'd say Martin, Kentucky, sometimes Prestonsburg, sometimes Floyd County, sometimes Pikeville. Far enough away, and I'd even say Lexington. If I say Frogtown, Kentucky, like very few people are going to know what I'm talking about. Same for Martin or Prestonsburg, honestly.
I had the Eastern Kentucky region from when I was a recruiter, so that
Mhm.
Floyd County was one of my counties. I love going out there, just like the rocks and the mountains and stuff is the most beautiful spot.
So you were competing against Pam Wright, who was the recruiter at Moorhead State. I don't know what years you were doing it.
This was just a couple years ago. It was 23.
I can tell you this. My husband was a recruiter for Moorhead. That stuff is much more political and brutal than I would have ever imagined.
Yeah.
Like he went to one school and the guidance counselor stopped him at the door and said, "Usually they bring us donuts.
Yeah.
Just so you know."
Oh, yeah. And I had never been a recruiter before. They outlawed the job I was doing in Kentucky, which was diversity, like special populations. URM is what we called it, underrepresented minorities. And they outlawed that. And so I became a territory manager in rural student outreach. And I had no background, didn't know what I was doing. I was walking into them schools. They picked me apart.
I teach race and gender, and I'm in Ohio where they just passed State Bill 1, which basically makes it illegal to teach anything controversial, which is everything I teach.
Mhm.
I read an article today about somebody, major university, it's blanking me now, but just got fired in Texas.
A&M.
Yeah, the teaching the gender unicorn. That's in one of my slides.
Well, it might have been. I know that someone at A&M just got fired in a student, like the student filmed, and
Yeah.
anything is controversial. I think
Right.
what's obvious is what they mean is that might offend conservative people because minoritized folks already know that they're going to have to experience racism, homophobia, and transphobia, that's built into the curriculum. So it doesn't usually occur to us to complain when it happens. Whereas our existence causes complaints. And that was certainly my experience in education in K through 12.
I was still doing that in Kentucky when they passed SB 150, which was basically Kentucky's Don't Say Gay bill in schools. And our university recruitment materials didn't get altered. EKU has a surprising commitment to inclusivity. And so our recruitment materials, going into classrooms, giving this presentation with rainbows on them and LGBTQ resources here and this and that. And I got kidnapped kind of at a school. They wouldn't let me leave. They locked me in a room and were like interrogating me about whether I was a pedophile and I shouldn't be allowed near kids. And yeah, that was the day I decided like I can't do this one anymore. But it was all because they were like, "Well, you don't know what it's like." And I was like, "Bitch, who do you think you're talking to? Of course I know what it's like. You are just now learning that things can be difficult out here, that things can be complicated, that things about who we are that we can't help can be taken away from us and politicized and put into machinations that actually don't have anything to do with us. You are just now learning. People like me have been living our lives this way. Fucking suck it up."
Yeah. When I look back at the things we were doing in 2015, 2016, and how skittish the world is now, and then the allies are now.
Listeners, Willie just did scare quotes around the word ally.
Yeah, I definitely did scare quotes for the ally. We had, in my final years in K through 12, we had parents complaining if we were just reading something written by a Black person. So the school policy was, if you're reading something and there's a parent complaint, you provide the alternative assignment. And so I am not going.
What's the alternative?
Right. I have literally, as much as I hate it, I went through As I Lay Dying and removed every cuss word for one family and refunded their $12 because they purchased a copy of that book. Gave them this edited version that tested the limits of Control F. But it's one thing, right? Because they're suggesting that saying, the word damn is so offensive that they can't be a part of it. And I'm saying, even though I disagree with you, I'm willing to act as the filter to remove the damn so that you can see it. But if you're saying to me that someone being Black or gay or trans is so offensive that you won't even look at what that person has to say, I will not be that filter. I can't morally be that filter who erases a Jewish voice and finds you a white voice. I won't do it. So I wrote a site-based policy. Kentucky had, for the longest time, site-based decision-making councils. A decision in the 1980s that basically said Kentucky schools must, because of our Constitution in the state, provide an equitable education to everyone in the state. And part of that reform was creating site-based decision-making councils that were made up of parents and teachers who made curricular decisions so that you didn't concentrate all that power into the superintendent's hands. So I went to this site-based decision-making council and said, here's the thing. No teacher should be required based upon the identity of a speaker to find a new source material. And our superintendent fought us on this, of all things. SB 150 was preceded the year before with SB 1. And that actually killed site-based councils. Ironically, under the guise of parents' rights.
Oh, yeah. It's always under the pearl clutching, protect the children, my right to, control everything my child learns.
Yeah, and they love to hide behind the motto name of the bill instead of the text of the bill. And I'm like, how is it parents' rights when SB 150 literally was the first time that parents had a legal authority in the curriculum? What they wanted was to give the authority to one person who could make swift decisions based upon complaints, as opposed to a site-based council that would have to wait, and as opposed to forcing conversation before decisions were made. After SB 1, we can do things in the dark.
Mm.
The other irony is that my students won a grant of $10,000 to buy books with diverse authors. And they did it because there were so many suicide attempts and so much general misery among their classmates. And so they did research on their own. They discovered that having books that reflected people helped in these issues. And so they made a grant proposal, won the grant. The school rejected all of their books, all of them. And of all things, when I got the email because I sent a list with every title. We worked with a curator who actually went through and gave us a list of all the best books on all the best lists. If there's a single title you have an issue with, let us know. We'll replace it. And they responded by rejecting all of them and said, as you know, because of SB1, we can't take them. And I said, all that SB1 says is that the superintendent gets to decide what books are in the library. It doesn't say that you're not allowed to have books. Which you say because of SB1, you're saying the superintendent won't allow us to have these books written by Black, queer, and women authors.
What was the point where you said, okay, I think I'm no longer interested in this kind of classroom experience?
My first year was horrific. At the time, Kentucky had an internship that teachers in their first year of teaching had to complete. And then without that completion, they didn't get a license. And that was the year when I was told, you have to be in the closet.
The preface to your book, Gay Poems for Red States, you opened with that anecdote about the principal saying, no one's going to protect you, including me. I felt that so deeply.
And the sad thing is, I'm not even upset at the person who said that, because at the very least, they were telling me the truth. Because a lot of people would have pretended like everything was fine until it wasn't, and then would have just let me die. We got from outside of here who did not understand how here works and had lots of big ideas that did not ultimately fly. But somehow I managed to sneak tenure in during that time. I was basically going into school like it was a fight every single day. We were still learning great things, but it was still secondary. My primary goal was to make sure students got civil rights, that students were protected, that when my LGBTQ students were bullied, or when students were racist with another student, that the school actually did something, because so often it felt like they didn't. And I was able to put up with that and frankly, even thrive in a lot of ways in those circumstances. 2016 changed things, because before then, I had my knowledge of the law on my side. And so when the school would say, well, you can't put those posters up, then I would say, well, you have to pull every single poster down because this is the limited open forum and this is settled Supreme Court law. So they would begrudgingly agree. Or when they would say, well, it's your word against theirs, I would say, pull the tapes. If you've ever pulled the tapes for anyone, you have to do it now or else you're singling out the student. After 2016, racism became a political standpoint, and it was as if we couldn't punish it anymore. The same for really any type of bullying. So first I saw that. And then two, I saw factions of people who were in no way connected to the school suddenly start attacking. In my final year, so we had a gay straight alliance in a rural town that was at its height 40 students strong. We would oscillate between 20 and 40 member students. Their parents were super involved. They would bring, cookies and help plan events. And the kids did such cool things. They cleaned parks. They, like I said earlier, won a grant of $10,000. They raised money when there were hurricanes, when there were floods. They raised money for mental health awareness. They taught themselves Black history and queer history. And in fact, these kids, they taught Tuesdays and Thursdays. One day was queer history, one day was Black history after school to each other.
Wow.
Because their school wouldn't teach it. And the school was completely silent, as if these kids never existed. We had a bass fishing team at this school. I know because we got emails weekly about the bass fishing
I got a
team and what they were
newsletter.
doing. They're not by the school. But when my students were in Time magazine for their advocacy, the school was silent, except for the teacher who mocked them. When my students won a grant, the school was silent. When I met the president on behalf of the work that my students did, my school was silent as if this wasn't happening. This group of people, they're actually connected to some church. I don't even know. I don't care enough to go learn about it, except that I know that this church is connected to the church in Tennessee with the pastor who burns books and claims people are witches.
Greg Locke.
I think that's him. So these people started basically going to board meetings, saying that it was inappropriate that a person who is openly gay should be a teacher, suggesting that there was something nefarious about the fact that I existed, suggested there was something nefarious about the fact that LGBTQ students existed. And I had to call a lawyer who said, don't say anything. You need to be silent. And then I was silent. And during that silence, I assume, got annoyed and then moved to harassing me online. They would even write like skits about what they thought my classroom must look like and attribute the words in these skits to me. People who didn't even have kids in the schools were doing this. And I was still silent because that's what the lawyer said to do. And then they went after my former students. They doxed them. They shared photos of them at their after school jobs. I mean, these were still kids. These were teenagers or early 20-somethings. They were getting threats as well. And it was at this point that I begged the school to please say something nice about these students or to share anything about these students or to do anything at all because they didn't in any way refute it. They didn't in any way say what my group actually was. And it was at that point that I realized, okay, as much good as I want to do in the schools, as much good as I think my presence in the classroom is, if it's causing my students to get threats, if they're now physically unsafe because I'm here, I don't think this is the best way to do the work I want to do. So that's when I knew I really can't. The actual moment happened. It was actually the day before I met Joe Biden. Teachers of the Year get to do this. And I was in DC. I went a day early because I thought, it would be nice to just have a little break because everything's been so stressful. And the only other queer teacher in my department messaged me early that morning and said they won't let me come to school because she had made a TikTok and the TikTok had a cuss word in it. They suggested that somehow she was unfit to be around children.
Is there a moral turpitude clause for teachers?
The license said something about upholding the dignity of the profession, but she was easily able to find another 20 teachers using curse words, and 2 weeks is unprecedented.
That's a hell of a story, and I really appreciate you sharing it. I did not know that it went all down like that. That's incredible. To target children.
So that's when I realized, like, how do I move forward? How do we all move forward if this is where we are? And that was 3 years ago. We now see that allowing politicians to molest children isn't even a stopping point for the group that's pushing the narrative. I don't think there is one.
No. And I'm less and less motivated to try to get inside their minds because I feel like it's nasty in there and I don't want any of it on me.
Yeah.
But when avenues such as those are closed off to people, it's not that there are no others. And so you
Right.
like many other folks, I think, and maybe even us included, have transitioned to creativity, to making art,
Yeah.
and to using your words, maybe some of the same words, but maybe even some better words. There's a lot of like freedom, I think, in your book. I mean, I did study poetry in college, and I did get my bachelor's in writing, but I am not a poet. I am an appreciator, but I felt so much expression in there.
One, thank you. And, I think when I started writing, the moment I started writing, I remember. There are these moments, I think, in a life like this where they just stand out and I won't forget them. And one was the moment I realized I'm never going back into the classroom. Standing there, about to meet the president, and I'm like, how can I be a person who is like lauded and cheered on and meeting the president, and simultaneously I have to go back to a school district that will prevent me from going to the classroom for 2 weeks over anything that they can find because my queerness is the problem, right? I was writing an email to my superintendent begging him to please do something. I started writing the first poem in this collection. Like when I was maybe halfway done with it, I pulled it over and put it into a separate file. And I was like, I don't know why I'm writing, but I have to. That was the day that whatever inner child I had, for whom school was a magical place, who knew what it could be, for whom school was a safe place that protected him, who watched a school be silent while kids were facing threats, who was watching me choose silence because a lawyer told me to. I think that was the moment that kid boiled over and was like, I need to speak. One of the things I really wanted to do in this collection is think about every single person in my family. When I think about Appalachia, think about these people who are denied a voice, who are denied access to poetry, who are sort of painted with a monolithic picture as somehow uncouth and uncivilized and uneducated, yet who say some of the most beautifully poetic things that I hear in any other discourse. And so I said, okay, I'm going to pretend that Appalachia, even though I know that Appalachians have been contributing poetically, since Appalachia's been here, but what if the people I come from had been writing poetry this whole time, completely cut off from the rest of the world? What would we have made it look like? How would we have honored those things that we're already doing? And that's really what I wanted this book to be.
Yeah. Hearing you talk about school as a safe place too, like Beck talks about this a lot.
I was that kind of nerd.
Oh, are you that kid? I'm working on a collection right now, about 80 pages in, and I'm remembering all those moments. Because school was, I would go home and teach my sister what I learned that day. She was ready for kindergarten when I wasn't, because it's magic. Tell me how it's not magic when Miss Sloan would stand in front of us and we were all sitting on the floor and we didn't know the letter T. And she looked at us and said, I think I can change the world and make sure that you can learn the letter T. And she says some words and she moves her hand and then 20 kids suddenly know something they didn't know before, right? That's transformative. And it's magic.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do. And what I do know from experience is I had rural kids in a small town in a Title IX school who were speaking French conversationally and winning every competition in the state because I knew that the primal sin is believing that they can't. So the primal sin is not walking in with that same imagination that my kindergarten teacher had.
Are you a theory nerd about like pedagogy and all that stuff?
To some extent, especially language acquisition.
Yeah, I'm a big Vygotsky fan, and I have been thinking a lot about the like scaffolding and the ways in which like queer rural youth are often not scaffolded. And I think that's actually that's an older experience. That may be just how queerness was, and in rural areas it's isolated to a point that hasn't changed much.
How could we have a zone of proximal development when there's no one nearby?
Exactly, when there's no proximity.
Yeah. I remember being 20 and I came out and was terrified of queer people because I thought I've already failed at one culture. I don't want to fail at another,
And I know.
I remember that feeling, and we're setting so many of these kids now up for that. And the data shows that like it is way worse than people think.
Absolutely.
Because the media is like, oh, every school is turning your kids trans and whatever. But the number of gay straight alliances is at the lowest point it's been since the 90s. Like we've lost, and the data goes down in 2016. We lost 20 years in about 3 years, and it's cowardly allies. Period. We lost the number of students who say there are at least 3 people in the building that they feel that they can trust. That data, it's down into the 90s category again. Not only can they not step into queerness by seeing it, they can't even step into their own queerness now in whatever terms that they might want to try to define it.
Something else about Appalachia, anyway, is the resiliency and ingenuity.
Mhm.
Any given thing can be queered. Any
Yes.
given third space can become a queer third space. And I just remember as I got older and came out into the wide world and stuff and started to think about myself, as I always knew that there was something wrong with me, and I constructed this whole like pretend morality. So like getting away from that, I started going like, you know what? I may have been doing straightness wrong, but I wasn't doing queerness wrong,
Mhm.
because there's no wrong way to do queerness. And that was so liberating. And it also felt very redneck to me. Queerness feels Appalachian.
I forget the name of it. He's in the Foxfire series, Queer 70s from Knott County. But he talks about this idea. He was living a queer existence in Eastern Kentucky, and then he goes to New York expecting to find this, liberatory.
Yeah.
And like, there's so many prescribed roles, top, bottom, bear, this. And he said, I think I was freer as a queer person in Appalachia.
Mhm. In Appalachia, there's the legislation or the legislature or administrations tend to be
Mhm.
very regressive or repressive or flat out to get you. But the people is a totally different, and it's flip flopped out here in the blue states.
Yes.
The blue states are like, you have access, there's rights and resources, and people aren't going hungry where I'm living anyway. That is not a blanket statement about all blue states, but the people, there's not a sense of freedom or liberation in queer spaces here. And I just can't quite get into the groove.
So it was actually in Minnesota that I kind of first had the chance to talk about this. I was invited to speak by very, very nice people. But the question that I was asked was like, basically, wow, it must be so exciting for you to come from somewhere as backward as Kentucky and now get to be in St. Paul, right? How liberating does it feel? And then I had to say, like, honestly, not at all.
Yeah.
I can go into any bar in West Virginia and quickly size up who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. Because everyone in West Virginia has had to ask themselves, am I homophobic or not? Right? They have settled this in their mind. The same for, am I racist or not? People in Vermont do not ask themselves, am I racist? Because they assume racism is a Southerner burning a cross in a yard. So I'd heard the most racist things I had ever heard in Vermont by teachers who would call themselves progressive, but didn't know that it was inappropriate to say things. And I couldn't teach them because you can't learn from some dumb hillbilly,
No.
right? I would say the same thing is true for me if I'm in sort of a progressive blue space that's hip and metropolitan. I don't know who's going to mock where I'm from or how I talk when I go into that space, and I can't discern them because no one has had to ask themselves how they feel about rural people, how they feel about hillbillies, if it's right or wrong to mock an entire culture. The way I look at it, randomized 10 people from Kentucky, 6 are conservative, 4 are liberal. In a randomized New York sample, 6 are liberal, 4 are conservative. So in a given room of 10 people, we're talking about the difference of 2 people. That's how different we are. It's not that different. It's the legislation that's different. But a result of that legislation is the stereotype that gets associated with the other people.
And it is influential. It is.
Yeah.
It's not that Appalachia or rural spaces are unfazed by these political forces. If you squeeze a population enough, they're going to start to look for the boogeyman. But talking about West Virginia, Beck, what was the name of your bar that you used to go to?
The Stonewall.
Did you go to the Stonewall in West Virginia?
Yeah, in Huntington, West Virginia. Yeah, that was my first gay bar.
Same here.
Yeah.
Might have been at 17 or 18 sneaking. Not probably was 18. But yeah, we used to, a girl I went to high school with was dating a girl who had a car that could get there. And we would all haul in 6 or 7 thick in this car, drive to Huntington. Once we went and a drag queen had propped the door open so we could sneak in. I remember this part. That was when we were in college. I was probably 20. And what's the other one that ends in wood? It was the kind of...
The Driftwood.
Yeah, Driftwood.
Oh, man, that sounds like a dive bar.
Oh, it was. But that's where he went to play pool. That was the best place to play pool.
That sounds awesome.
But Stonewall, back in the day, they had all you could drink beer for $5.
Jesus.
And you would see these little, it was nasty. I guess that they just took Natty Light, poured water on top of it, and they served it in little styrofoam cups. But I saw many a twink
just laid out everywhere. It was screwdrivers that they all drank because you could get a screwdriver for 50 cents at the bar I snuck into down in Knoxville. I wanted to ask you about the Jerry Springer poem. because I fucking love this poem so much. Not just because Jerry Springer is a universal truth, I think, but like finding Appalachian representation and queer representation. Like Appalachian representation on TV is always so problematic and it always is slightly queered. But the way that we're so thirsty for it, that when we find it in the most unusual places, we're just like, oh, hell yeah, I seen on Jerry Springer today. Or on Cops. Did you ever watch Cops Looking for Your Neighbors?
I really am. I'm so grateful for Jerry Springer and to Jerry Springer.
I know.
I had a weird mom. I have a weird mom, but I mean, I guess I'm thinking of her like as the presence that got to control us when we were kids. Mom is one of 13 kids from a Pentecostal from the head of a holler in Appalachia. And
It's my family.
I was about to say, I think your cousin, you and Beck might be cousins.
we might,
Yeah, I have 41 first cousins, so you can just add you in there.
yeah, I got over 100. So I'm sure it has to mix in at the edges.
Yeah.
But yeah, she would wake us up at 1 a.m. to watch Jerry Springer. I remember a few episodes in particular where like one was the KKK was on and they were talking to a black preacher. And Mom wanted us to know what racism was and why it was bad. This was an accessible way. And unlike other places that didn't want to get dirty, like Jerry Springer brought out the worst people and we got to learn from. Mom would make us go. She was so committed to her form of anti-racism. Like we had black Santa Clauses because Mom was like watching Santa Claus be white. Yeah. Or like she would redo her house all the time. But there was once when it was all black angels. Looking back, I'm like, I don't even know what to think of it because on the one hand, like what she was doing, the intention was to make things more diverse. The intention was beautiful. It's slightly odd, I guess. I think for people who might try to say like, oh, it's performative, but like I know her heart, it was not performative. This is how my mom responded. So yeah, Jerry Springer gave me the opportunity to see queer people with lives. When Gay Poems Spread Stage came out and we were thinking of people who might want to blurb it, one of the first people to come up was Leslie Jordan. And we sent him a copy and he was so gracious and responded and said like, oh, I'm so proud of Willie. I hope this book does so well. I'm in the middle of a move and I hope I can get to read it, but I might not in time. And he passed away like a week later. And we sent it to Jerry Springer, who passed away a week later. And then they said, we can send it to RuPaul. And I was like, we're going to send it to Rand Paul.
Oh, bless him though.
Yes. I don't want to use the word inner child because I feel like it has really specific notions sort of attached to theory, but there is a kid who exists somewhere. And that kid was writing in this and taking advantage of, I don't know, whatever skills or vocabulary or ability to sort of express his world. But I mean, it was sometimes like I could just feel him sitting there wanting to write. And I would get up every morning and just say, all right, I'm going to sit down. And then I didn't know what I was going to write, but he would tell me, this is what he wants to talk about today.
I love that idea of another piece of you narrating. It's not someone else, it's still you. But folks who have come up from marginalized backgrounds or in places of adversity, they're squashing some part of themselves down.
Well, I think you're 100% right. And I think especially queer people and the groomer motif. When I shared the cover of this book for the first time, multiple people on Twitter say, why is there a child on your book? You effing groomer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, I'm being accused of grooming my own childhood self. That's how twisted the right is. But it also is how it is a story that every gay man from the 80s, born in maybe even the early 90s, carries with him. This knowledge that you're going to be accused of harming kids. And I think for a lot of queer people, or a lot of gay men, especially maybe in their late 30s, early 40s and older, separated themselves from their childhood self as much as they possibly can. One, because we saw childhood as something that queerness couldn't be a part of. And two, because we saw ourselves as often so weak and vulnerable during childhood that we wanted to separate ourselves from it as much as possible.
And vulnerability is a great sin in Appalachia. I was even thinking about like gendering and the way that everything is so gendered, and like effeminacy is one of the worst things you can be, even for women. Women can't be effeminate a lot of times.
Yep.
We joked a lot about how hard it was to tell if a girl was a lesbian or just in the 4-H.
Like, I have an aunt who sleeps with a pistol because she shoots copperheads in the middle of the night because her house like is infested with her.
That is so good.
Not queer. She carries a wallet in her back pocket. But yet my husband's from Metro Atlanta. When he first came down, he was really shocked at how rigid the norms are. I was shocked when I moved to Georgia. I'm like, I thought everyone was gay. Every man I saw in Athens, Georgia, placed in Floyd County, would have been trying to advertise his queerness. That's how I would have perceived it. But I'm like, no, they just wear shorts that short and talk about cake. And the other side of this is that my father-in-law thinks I'm somehow super masculine, and I'm like the biggest sissy ever. But I was helping him move, and it was one of the first times I met him, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to have to get somebody to come take that piece of furniture apart. Your mom about that. And I mean, it's some kind of complicated. And I go, that's just a wing nut. We can remove that from the top and collapse these sides. So I like screw the top off and pull the sides off, and he goes, oh my God, you're some kind of genius. The other time his brake light wasn't working on his camper, and I kind of looked under the camper and saw a wire, and I just heard like some Appalachian voice in my head go, better ground that wire. So I touched it in the mantle and the brake light started working, and he thinks I'm some sort of mechanical genius.
It's just that adaptability.
Yeah.
Well, before we close out, I was wanting to get you to tell us a little bit about this novel you got coming out. Absolutely.
And yeah, I don't know that I've even gotten to tell its genesis story. I was in Montreal. So the city is named after Mont Royal, which is a royal mountain, which is a mountain in the middle of Montreal for some reason. And it has a pretty delicate walking path up to the top of the mountain. And it's about a 45-minute. You can use the word hike, but I mean, it's paved. I was walking up it completely out of breath, had to sit down and take a breather. And a woman probably older than 80, wearing high heels, just breezed past me mid-conversation. So I was thinking about that woman as I'm walking up, and I have this image from childhood that pops up. And it's of me and my cousin. We were pushing our bicycles to the head of the holler because we couldn't ride them up. We got tired because we wanted to ride the bikes back down. And this little mean ginger girl looks at us. And I mean, she was so mean, she might as well have been smoking, even though she's about 9 years old. But she goes, and bikes work better if you sit on them. I couldn't stop laughing about her. So when I get to the summit of the mountain, I sketch out a quick little poem about the experience. And it's nostalgic. It's not a really heavy poem. There's a bit of a moment at the end of it. But that little girl, that little ginger girl in my poem was like standing by me when I tried to go to sleep, going like, you need to tell my story. Like she was mad about it. So then I sat down and wrote a story, and it was the same moment happened in the story that was in the poem, but it's completely different now. Even though the exact same action happens, like once we've been sitting with this little girl all day, we understand that moment differently. That's how the poem sort of started. This idea that we can't really know anything about the people that we're looking at. We can't really know anything about the moment that we're looking at because truth is so friggin' complicated. And the more I wrote, the more I realized what my heart was wanting to tell was a story about those people who are so often in the backgrounds of stories and don't get to have a moment, who don't get to have their truth sort of on display. So it's a book about blue collar women who are doing good. It's a book about queer people, about loss. It's really a reminder that if everything is a painting, you can't pull certain colors out. You can't pull certain people out. You're stuck with us, whether you want us or not, even if the perception of what we are is torn.
Wow, that sounds really powerful. The title again is Tore All to Pieces. I love that phrase.
One of the reasons I will be honest that I stuck with this title is I sent a poem in to a very large queer review that solicited it. And then the editor returns it. And the poem was written from the perspective of a boy in Eastern Kentucky. And he used the phrase tore up underpin. And the editor changed it to torn up. And I ended up not publishing with them.
What the hell?
Oh, that's a whole different conversation. We can have the ignorance I've seen from supposed progressive people who have these lovely calls about being open to the experiences of minoritized people. Then they don't like or don't understand the experience, but assume that they do.
They want to tell our story for us.
Yeah, well, they want to tell it in a way that makes sense to them. For example, I had a short story that went to a review, and I kid you not, the editor wrote back and said I needed to work on characterization because one of the characters appears to take herself very seriously, but uses words like y'all and ain't.
Somebody just today that I was talking to, the podcast space, the queer redneck podcast space, there's a bit of a vacuum there. We're kind of it. Ray Garinger with Country Queers has done a whole lot of multimedia, amazing stuff there. But folks in the comedy space, I get lots of questions like, which one are you making fun of here? And somebody today said, why would you smash these two disparate themes together? And I said, first of all, it's just, this is what we are. Like, what do you mean? We're queer Appalachians. You're asking, why do we exist? If you ask that.
Yeah.
I kind of appreciated that moment of clarity. You may not know what you just said, but what you said to all these people was, why do you exist? How dare you exist, actually?
Somebody way back in the day when I had Twitter had commented, like, I don't understand why a gay person would live in Appalachia. So I responded earnestly and then reposted the response, but said, I live in Appalachia because I think it will be easier to convince Appalachians to treat queer people with dignity than it will be to convince people living in blue states to treat Appalachians with dignity. It's going to be a lot easier. And someone responded who lived in Oregon who was like, it was a big gut punch for me. She said, because I realized how often I have probably engaged in behaviors that are what you're talking about without realizing I was doing it. It's amazing to me how little people can know about a subject, but this is part of the issue, right? They are educated. They think in their educated state that Southerners, hillbillies, Appalachians, rednecks, that all these people exist in some less than state. And the only person who can teach you about what it means to be a queer hillbilly is a queer hillbilly. But we are precluded from being allowed to teach them anything because we are a hillbilly.
And just the stuff that we make and do and the way we are, I mean, it's just, we are delightful, you know?
Yes, we are.
I hope more people start writing poems. I hope more queer Appalachians or Appalachians in general start to get on the airwaves. There's all these jokes about there's too many podcasts out there or whatever. Maybe that's neither here nor there, but I know that there's still not enough variety of voices on the airwaves. I'm not entertaining notions of there should be fewer voices out there until we have a saturation of diversity on the air.
The good thing about having queer Appalachian voices, about having Black Appalachian voices is I remember growing up, and even though people in my immediate vicinity didn't affirm queerness, from television alone, that there were people out there who thought that LGBTQ people deserve dignity, that there were people out there who were fighting for gay marriage, that there was an entire part of America that thought the queer part of me deserved dignity. No part of America thought that the Appalachian part of me deserved dignity. And no part of America will listen to the Appalachian part of me, but it will listen to me as a queer person. So I can at least use that queerness as an inroad to get them to listen. Yeah. And I find that powerful. I'm grateful that I'm queer because I get to talk to people who otherwise wouldn't talk to me.
I am really enjoying your social media content and how often TikTok thinks that you're a homesteading lesbian. I just really enjoy that. Would you mind telling the folks where they can find you online?
Facebook, I'm probably the only Willie Edward Taylor Carver Jr. And I think I'm Willie Carver Jr. Jr. at Instagram. Someday I'll delete X, but with all of the complications, literally lawyers recommend that when you've had a big mullet, you wait years before deleting anything. But yeah, please follow me on any of those things. And definitely there's a lot of TikTok misidentification. And right now I'm obsessed with the doll that has a cigarette in her mouth.
God, I love that too. Are you doing those quotes on there? Oh my God, those are so fucking funny.
I think I'm up to like 80 of them now.
Everybody go check out Willie's Instagram. We'll put the links in the show notes because this little yarn, I think it's knit. I don't think it's crochet doll with a cigarette in its mouth talks just like your Meemaw. It's just killing me. Well, would you like to share anything with the Queernecks followers? We're not very good at interviewing people, so
y'all are great at interviewing people. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you both for doing what you're doing. And I love that idea of saturating spaces because the truth is right now, I think it's not that there are too many. I think socially we are moving into a space where not everyone's consuming the same thing. There's going to be a lot more variety and we need all the help we can get in getting representation out there because the marketplace of ideas, it's limited. Yeah. So the more queerness we can get, the better. The more Appalachian we can get, the better.
Oh, yeah. People need to know how queer Appalachia is and how Appalachian queerness can be. No matter where it is in the country, your queerness is more akin to Appalachianness than you will realize because the tenacity, the ingenuity, the resilience, the community building, the mutual aid. I mean, anybody that wants to know how it's done just needs to look at Appalachia.
I've got a friend in Sydney, Australia, And she told me once that somehow she happened to be in some work-related training, and someone said the word Appalachian. It was asking people, like, what thoughts do you have when you hear the word? And she was like, and I suddenly realized everything I thought was queer, because I only see the words Appalachia with like queer possums and queer shit all the time. And that makes me so joyous.
Yeah.
The Appalachians who are most embracing the term and embracing their roots are the queer folks. I think everyone else is too busy licking police boots.
We've had our sermon today, so let's stay on this positive route. We're super proud of you in Kentucky producing more and more great artists. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank y'all. Meant a lot.
Well, now feels like a good time for a word from our sponsor. This week's episode of Queernecks is brought to you by the County Fair, an OSHA demilitarized zone, an FDA détente, a third space smorgasbord. This year's theme is Carnival of Cows. Come on down to the fairgrounds, where the rides are equal parts thrills, chills, and duct tape, and the smell of funnel cakes and cow manure weave into the most comforting and nostalgic olfactory tableau of your life. Test your luck at carnival games rigged tighter than Aunt Rhodey's rum cake. Win a goldfish that will definitely be dead before school starts. Or a stuffed bear that smells like Marlboro Reds and diesel fuel. If you're hungry, get yourself a corn dog longer than your forearm, a bucket of curly fries dripping with molten cheese product, and wash it all down with a literal gallon of lemonade shaken by a teenager who's definitely not unsober. And don't miss the livestock pavilion, where prize-winning heifers strut like runway models, and you'll find at least one rooster that looks like he's judging your outfit. Pat them all, telling them how they're the prettiest you've ever seen, and on your way out, sneak a photo of the greased pig chase signs for your Grindr profile. A Ferris wheel ride with your crush, a little handbrush in the midway, that electric spark when you both reach for the same deep-fried Oreo. The country fair holds all the liminal potential of your first time sneaking into a gay bar. But you don't have to worry about getting grounded if you get caught. You might still get crabs from the toilet seat, though. Put on your best flannel, fashion-forward look, grab your last $5 and your senses of wonder and humor, and come on down to the county fair, proudly sponsoring Queernecks.
That's awesome.
The county fair is not really an experience I actually had that much growing up, but now it's one of my favorite.
Oh, I went every year. The Demolition Derby was my favorite.
I'm so jealous.
I gotta love a good Demolition Derby. It's the redneck in me.
It's I mean, I know I've said this before, but it's just the life cycle of engineered things. That's the perfect reduce, reuse, recycle farm equipment or whatever, or cars.
Yeah. They do buses, even like school buses. They do a school bus derby down there.
I don't know if I would you ever drive in a demolition derby?
Hell no. I'm too chicken.
Come out with whiplash or something.
Yeah, I'm way too breakable.
I don't know if this feels true because I have done so many stupid things just for the hell of it.
Amen to that.
But demolition derby, I'm like, oh no, not me.
My neighbor, I had a neighbor that helped me a whole lot when I was down at mom's, and he entered and he won his heat. He came in like third of the over.
What was he driving?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I'm not good at naming cars.
Oh, it was a car though? Okay.
Yeah, beat up old car.
I might do the little riding lawnmower one. I don't know, because they don't go very fast.
Yeah, that could be fun. This week's noun of Appalachian interest is gas station chicken. Gas station chicken isn't just a food, it's a rite of passage. In Appalachia, it's basically our soul food. The kind of meal that says, yes, I do have a cousin named Bebo, and yes, he is on his third wedding, thank you for asking. You ain't gonna find this stuff in some big city Whole Foods, no sir. You gotta pull into the station where the gas pump's still clicking over in dollars and cents, and inside there's a fryer that's been in continuous operation since the Carter administration. That fryer's seen more history than your high school history teacher. The chicken comes in 2 speeds, fresh out of the grease, and I've been under this heat lamp long enough to qualify for Social Security. Either way, it's perfect. You can get it with tater wedges the size of your forearm. We call them JoJo's where I come from. Or if you're lucky and it's Thursday, a side of frog legs. Because nothing says fine dining like deep fried amphibian next to a Pepsi cooler. And let's not forget the packaging, the flimsy styrofoam clamshell that always springs open in the passenger seat like it's got a vendetta against your upholstery. One wrong turn and suddenly your Camry smells like Colonel Sanders' retirement plan. There's also the mystique of gas station chicken, like why does it always taste better when you purchased it next to windshield wiper fluid and Slim Jims? Is it the grease in the air vents? The spiritual blessing of Marlboro smoke floating in from the lottery ticket line? We may never know, but the science is settled. Gas station chicken slaps. And every town has one gas station that's famous for it. In my hometown, it's the Briar Patch. Open 24/7, 365 days a year, and they have everything from racing fuel to crock pots to live bait to, yes, fried chicken. Folks will argue about it like they're debating politics. Nah, you gotta go over to the BP by the Dollar General. Their chicken's crispier. You gotta stop in at the Briar Patch, though. The gas station chicken isn't just dinner, it's a survival kit. Running late to a wedding? Grab a 12-piece. Hosting a wake? Somebody better show up with thighs and drumsticks. Snowstorm rolling in? Forget milk and bread. You stock up on chicken and wedges because priorities. So next time you're on a back road, low on gas, questioning your life choices, remember, Appalachia's greatest philosopher once said, probably while licking his fingers, all you need is a tank full of gas and a box of gas station chicken.
That is literally what I had last night. I like to go up there right when they're shutting down and get the last box, whatever's sitting there, and they mark it down to $2.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It still tastes good to me.
The Briar Patch is an amazing place. They have literally everything you can think of. And then one of the people that owned it, they put up all kinds of Christmas decorations and just never took them down. So like the ceiling, there's a drop ceiling kind of, and there's a big space between it. And so the whole top of the building is lined with Mrs. Santa Claus, dozens of them. It's the weirdest place. It's the kind of place where you can pay for everything in pennies if you need to, and they'll stand there and let you count every one of them.
Because it spins.
Yep, it sure does. I worked at the Briar Patch one summer, and it was wild. It was a lot of fun. Like during the county fair, because the county fair is also in Lucasville, there were waves coming in of the red lights. Like you'd clear out a bunch, and then another red light full of people would come through.
It's like one of those that needs its own exit on the interstate.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they have like a deli counter. Plus, they have all the fried food you can imagine. They have cheese sticks and frog legs and fried chicken and potato wedges and fried macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, here at this place last night, they had duck bacon wontons. And I thought it was so strange. They're cream cheese wontons, but they have duck bacon in them instead. And it's fucking delicious. But it also, like, you can't do shit after you've ate that.
Yeah.
Just maybe like one fewer of those ingredients would have been a little bit, like more moderate. But that was some of the most decadent stuff. And I know that I'll never eat foie gras because it creeps me out the way it's made. Not because I think that it's perfectly reasonable to have an ethical objection to how it's made. But I'm just personally disgusted by the thought. I have somebody worked real hard to give me an eating disorder growing up, and it might have been the woman who raised me. And so the concept of being force-fed is really upsetting to me. So it's literally that. But yeah, it's ethically murky as well. But I know that it is probably super delicious. And that's what I imagine it to be like, is like this really decadent, like over-the-top kind of culinary experience. This is the gas station version of it, though. For some reason, it feels like less unethical. Well, who should we thank this week? Thank you to all the listeners. Hey, if you share the show with your networks, if you know anybody that you're like, hey, they might find this absurdly specific kind of content interesting, I'll send it to them. Share it on your social media if you're enjoying it. If you are enjoying the show and you haven't yet, log on to whatever podcatcher you use to listen and give us a 5-star rating and write us a little review if you feel that's warranted. That helps us out immensely. I don't even know if y'all know how much of a help that is for us.
Plus, it gives us the warm fuzzies.
It also just feels really good. It feels nice to have people tell you that they appreciate the stuff you're doing, even though we would be doing this even if you all hated us. And if you have something to say or something to tell us, you can hit us up on Facebook, or you can email us at
mailbag@queernecks.com.
If you want to tell us a story, I think it would be fun to read people's crazy stories on the show. If you wanted to, just make sure you're comfortable with us saying it. We'll not say who you are, though, but just love telling stories. That's all for now. We'll see y'all next time. Say hey to Mom and them.
Bye.